Six Flags Over Texas is the original Six Flags park, and it sports a solid 13 roller coasters and will be opening their 14th in 2022. Luckily, I was able to ride 11 of the 12 major ones back in March, and of course found their homes on my coaster rankings. So this week we dive into one of the closest knit rankings of coasters I've done. This is all the coasters at Six Flags Over Texas ranked. So the usual leadoff in this situation is the kiddie coaster, and it's no different here. In this case, Over Texas sports Wile E. Coyote's Grand Canyon Blaster, a decently themed Chance Rides Big Dipper. It fills the important role in the park, but nothing else. Moving on. Coming in the 12th spot is the park's other borderline family kiddie coaster in the Mini Mine Train. My biggest takeaways from this ride were the oddly shallow cars that I had to sit cross-legged in, and the actual bit of intensity compared to the larger mine train. A weird but interesting one-and-done coaster. Then we have the standard Runaway Mine Train by Aerodynamics. This coaster features 3 chain lifts and a bit of an uninspiring layout. I thought about dropping this below the mini version, but the best part of the ride was the little saloon theming scene at the end of the last chain lift. So it's a unique twist to an otherwise below average mine train. Sticking with the family rides, we have a solid family coaster with Pandemonium. A Gerstlauer clone spinner felt pretty much exactly the same as the one I've ridden in Six Flags New England. As always, this ride gives some pretty surprising, intense moments on the downward helix, and it's fun throughout with a very smooth experience. Moving on to the 9th spot, we have Runaway Mountain, an indoor premier rides coaster with a similar layout to the older Hurricane models. Now going in, I was expecting something similar to Skull Mountain at Great Adventure, but I was pretty pleasantly surprised. This coaster is definitely a step up in intensity and enjoyment. The ride had some intensity in those turns, and the theming inside is great. I'll leave out specifics for those going in blind, but it definitely had me smiling through the whole ride. Plus, it's in absolute pitch darkness to start, and that really adds to the fun. It's probably the biggest positive surprise of the trip. Next up at 8 is the intimate bobsled, La Vibora. This was the first coaster of the trip as it opened before the 11 o'clock rope drop, and it was an easy decision to go check off the low capacity bobsled. Now, my previous experience with these style of rides was Flying Turns at Knoebels, which is a wooden bobsled, and Avalanche at King's Dominion. Now, this ride was definitely the most intense of the 3, but it was also easily the roughest of the 3. It wasn't so much painful, just a bit uncomfortable, especially in those transitions that really kind of jarred you around. If it isn't too busy, then absolutely go grab a ride on this ride. I think it's a dying model that won't be around too long, but other than that, it's fun. Moving up to number 7, we have the only major coaster that I didn't get to ride with Judge Roy's Scream. Unfortunately, this ride was completely closed both days, but I can take my guesses and check out and build on other reviews. So it seems the consensus on this ride is it seems pretty basic out and back woody that isn't really rough, but it's not butter smooth either. It has airtime hills with some okay airtime, but nothing crazy. So my best guess is it'd be a bit more entertaining than the bobsled, but it doesn't offer much more than that. So let me know from your experience below, and maybe it should move up or down. Now we get into some of those next tier rides. Now first up at 6 is Shockwave, which some of you may kill me for. This was easily one of the most intense pair of elements I have ever experienced. The twin circular loops to start this ride are pure insanity, and they made me gray out before pulling into the rest of the layout. My issue with this ride was the rest of that layout, and it didn't really do much. Now, I only got a front row ride, so I'm guessing I missed a lot of airtime in the back. But in the front, all I got were very short pops of airtime, and in terms of a comfortable ride, it wasn't rough by any means, but it just feels like it was missing something else after those loops. You know, maybe it needed a corkscrew or another inversion to complete it, but I did miss a back row ride, unfortunately. Then we have Joker, the cloned 4D free spin. Yes, I have this barely above Shockwave. Because of how good the potential for this coaster can be, a good ride on these 4D free spins leaves me giggling the whole time. That being said, a bad one can also either be really boring if you're not flipping around, or painful. Overall, these are only separated by 4 total spots on my list, and I think if I got the back row ride on Shockwave, I might have set it a spot above, but for now, I'll take the clone. Now, speaking of clones, here is perhaps the best multi-cloned ride ever in Batman the Ride. The B&M invert was pretty much exactly the same as the one I have in my home park in Jersey, but I will always enjoy these. From the whippy inversions to the feeling of having your legs torn off in that final helix, it's a great ride for almost any park. Sure, I would love an original layout, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. An easy pick for 4th, and it's very close to the 3rd. Perhaps even more unpopular than putting Shockwave 6th, I'm gonna drop Mr. Freeze at 3. I think I went in with some pretty high expectations, but it really is a great and unique ride. The reverse launch is pretty damn intense in almost every row, and the top hat is a really tight turn. My favorite part of the ride was easily that spike though, specifically in the back row. The boosters really send the trains higher than you're expecting, and that vertical drop is satisfying as can be. My only real gripe with this ride is it feels like it's an element or two short of a full layout. And the shuttle feature is unique, but it doesn't really add much for me. I'd rather a fuller layout. The spike is definitely best face down, but I think overall I prefer the launch forwards, but I'm really nitpicking here. It's a really solid ride, and it drops in at 29th overall for me. Then we have a ride that I expected to not really enjoy at all, but Titan was actually fun. It wasn't mind-blowing, but sometimes rides with huge drops and crazy speeds will surprise you a little bit. This Giovanolo Hyper has a 255-foot drop and a twister layout that will absolutely melt your face off. This ride specializes in 2 crazy helices and not much else after that. Still, it's enough to get 27th overall on my list, but it's a step below great. The drop is extremely long, but it's too shallow to be great. The only airtime hill after the turnaround gives some great floater if you're sitting all the way in the front, but anything behind that really falls short. Honestly, I feel like the twister layout could work really well, but this ride is a couple tweaks away from being great. A steeper drop and a couple extra airtime moments, but as is, it's kind of boring here and there for such a massive coaster. Finally, topping at number 1 is the original RMC, New Texas Giant. Another ride that is a few tweaks away from being so good, but it falls just a little bit short of the line. My first ride was in the back, and that ride absolutely hauled through its layout, supplied plenty of ejector air time, and I even got off with some sore thighs, and I was very impressed. Now, the front wasn't as impressive, but it wasn't bad by any means, and you still get that wind in your face sensation. The first drop definitely has some whip in the back, the overbanks are fun, and almost all the airtime moments hit. That being said, the layout definitely feels like RMC's first, almost like they went a little bit safe. The ending really isn't anything more than some bunny hops here and there back to the station, while you'll see on newer rides, those would be ejector hills. And you can definitely tell the lack of their trademark rolls and stalls are a missed element here. However, I do have to mention that the looks of the trains are really cool with the theming, even if the window panes kind of suck, because if you put your arms up, you hit against them. Now, the Großschaller trains I think are really comfortable, and the chicken coop in the station is probably one of the funnier station elements out there. Overall, this is the best ride in the park. It's a respectable 12th on my overall list, but it is the lowest of my 4 RMCs. Before I go, I'll throw up a guess out there for Aquaman, which was supposed to open in 2020, then 2021, now 2022. The mock power splash will probably feel more like a water ride than a roller coaster, but it has a shuttle launch, an airtime hill, and 2 massive spikes that look very entertaining. I would say in the Texas heat, this probably falls around 8th in the park, with some room to either rise or fall a little bit. A solid addition, but not quite a complete roller coaster. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week's ranking of the original Six Flags coaster collection. Feel free to roast my takes below, and make sure to look out for what's next for this park dropping next week as well. For more coaster content, check out Island Coasters on Instagram for daily content, news, and even giveaways sometimes. Till next week, that's all from the shores of Island Coasters.